Let me ask you this, man. So you had these like the cream of the crop of these guys, right? And this was during a time where we were just fighting in Vietnam, but everybody knew that the shit was also going on in Cambodia and Laos and North Vietnam and all that. So what was their, I guess, purpose in a way? Because they weren't conventional, obviously, by any means. So what was their purpose of being there to go into these, like, into denied territory?
Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Zero Bunker. Now, if this is your first time here at the Zero Bunker, we want to welcome you. This is a safe place for all you skullfuckers out there. My name is CJ. This is G. Today is a badass episode because we have a special guest. G, go ahead and introduce the guest, man.
All right, what's going on, guys? So just like you said, we have another guest that's going to go through the gauntlet. And on the other line, we have Jason Economos. Did I say it right?
Yep, that's right, man.
All right, so tell everybody what's up, man.
How's it going, everybody? Happy to be here.
All right, good deal, good deal. So, yeah, this is exciting, man, because we, I believe we didn't we do another podcast with John, right? If I remember.
Yeah, we did too.
Okay, that's right. Yeah, man. So I'm glad that you're on this on here with us today, man. So,
yeah.
This is a subject, I get right into it. This is a subject that a lot of you guys have been asking for because we do a lot of the, cool shit about military, man. And we're diving into the secret sides and the dark side of the old school skullfuckers, man. And
wait.
Yeah.
You're saying that Zero's going to go to the dark side of something? No,
yeah, dude,
come on.
This is like the dark of the fucking dark side, man. And so I know a lot of you guys have been requesting this, and we have the perfect guest, and we're going to be talking about Mack V Sog. And if you have no idea what that is, you're going to get introduced to it. So Jason, man, so kind of walk us through a little bit. I know you're super passionate about this special unit, and tell us like how, give us a little bit of your background about, who you are and how did you get to this level, man?
All right. So I'm pretty much nobody, man. I'm just a regular civilian puke. And when I was in college, I, for some reason, started reading more and more about special operations during the Vietnam War. And one unit kept sticking out like a sore thumb. And I was actually introduced to the unit way back in the day. There was an old show called Tour Duty, and some of you guys might know about it. And, yeah, I mean, the first season is still the best season, of course, but the third season is actually when they joined SOG, and just the way the show turned into more of like a special mission type unit. And so I kind of had that very brief, rudimentary background idea for what they used to do. And so as I was reading a couple of books about special forces in Vietnam, I kept coming across the acronym SOG, SOG, and just finally one day just decided to start writing a story. I don't know what piqued my interest, like what led me down that path to just, I don't know, start writing a fictional story. And there was a guy on eBay that was hawking some of his gear from his time in Vietnam, and I sent him a message, and he was a special forces guy, and I sent him a message and asked him if he'd read it. And at that time, I had about 30 pages of it, and I wasn't writing about SOG at this time, but he sent me a message back and pretty much tore me down, like just was like in a good way. He gave me a lot of good critical.
Did he knife hand you? Did you get knife hand?
You know what? If it would have been in person, he would have probably would have double knife handed me for sure.
Well, there's one thing I got to ask. Hold on a second. So just to kind of quarterback in this thing real quick. So you went on eBay and there was this fucking skullfucker who was selling his gear on eBay. Now did he have ear necklaces being sold on there? I'm just curious.
He had elbows and toenails and all the shit in between, man.
Oh, dude.
A legit motherfucker for sure. And he was actually assigned to Command and Control Central, or excuse me, Command and Control South for a couple months, and then was reassigned to the 3rd Mobile Strike Force, I believe. It's been a while, but anyway, so he had a very brief run with SOG, but he knew about the project, he knew about the mission, and so he gave me a lot of pointers, a lot of criticism on it. And at that time, I didn't know a great deal about SOG, so I just kind of stepped away from the project for a couple of months, trying to consolidate, trying to regain my bearing and my focus and what exactly I wanted to do as far as writing a story. And then at that point, I just started researching SOG, and that's how I got into writing about it.
Well, can we and I don't want to take away. So obviously we're going to get to the book and we're going to talk about all this, but I actually have kind of just taken 3 steps backwards. I'm curious, first of all, whenever I joined the military, I had no background or understanding really of the military, to be honest with you. I didn't have that natural tick to look into it or to understand really history to a great extent or anything. And even today, as now a Marine Corps veteran, I still, it's not something that was always just natural for me. And I know that there's a lot of guys out there that are real, obviously big fans of the military, and it's just this real honed in interest. How did that start with you? I mean, because we kind of started with you're saying I had an interest in Vietnam, but was that just organic? Is that just something you just always had?
Yeah, kind of, man. I hate to say this, but I'm the dude that should have joined that just didn't join for whatever reason. I can't. It's kind of weird to explain it that way, but yeah, just being a kid, I'm no different than probably you guys were running around in the woods with toy guns and all the old M56 web gear and all that shit. I mean, we had so much fun, playing war as kids, and then some friends ended up going in and some friends didn't. Unfortunately, it's something that I'll regret not doing, but I'm happy to help preserve the history and the unit, the unit history and the men that served in this unit, and there are other units that I want to write about as well. But SOG is, for me, it's a special breed of guys for sure.
Well, and I would definitely want to make it clear to everybody listening right now. First of all, and G, I know you agree with me on this one, man. Is that we get guys every once in a while that are man, I'm gonna I regret not going in, or I wish I would have served, and I understand the sentiment, but at the same time, man, I have so much fucking respect for you and what you're doing, and in a lot of ways you're contributing more than a lot of guys that join, and there is nothing but mad respect, and I don't think we look at people as civilians and enlisted or not. It's
absolutely, man. I mean, it's like you said before, you're preserving history, because the truth of the matter is this unit, I mean, it was they were running clandestine top secret operations in countries that, quote unquote, we were not supposed to be in, right? And I mean, these guys, answer to the highest level of the government. And my understanding is that some of these missions, probably even to this day, are still kept, locked up, and nobody knows what the hell really happened. And so you're, when you were talking about the research, right? This is what I wanted to get it into. Was the research limited, the facts and finding stories and finding the training and all the other good stuff? How hard was it? Because it's not something that the government is yeah, man, yeah, we did all this crazy shit and this is how it worked.
Did you get threatened? Did somebody show up at your fucking door and be he knows too much?
I did have a guy. He asked me he was jokingly asking me if I was working for the Russians at some point. But
really,
dude, do you think Mueller? Do you think Mueller has your name? There's a file with him.
No, but in all seriousness, man, how did you come up with the research? Because, like I said, I don't think there was enough material out there to come up with a great book that you did. So how did you go from there, man?
So okay, first of all, let me just say that you guys the compliment you just poured on me there, that's huge for me, and my respect for you guys is tremendous. So So thank you for that. That was awesome. So the research after I talked to this guy, what I just started buying as many books on the subject as I could get, even if it was a small blurb, even if it was a chapter or a paragraph. I started doing as much research as I could, and I basically started Googling these men's names. One man in particular, who was a recon man, his name was Lee Birkins. He wrote a fantastic book. It's called Soldier's Heart. He deals with a lot of PTSD issues, and it's a non-linear style book. So you get some war, you get some post-war, and anyway, so I started. I Googled these guys' names, and one name led me to another guy, and I would talk to him, and I'd ask him a question that he wasn't well versed in, like perhaps he didn't know the answer, and he would send me to this other guy, and so at the time I was in school, so I had a legit email account through the school, and when I would send these guys emails, I would use that account so they knew it wasn't a bullshit email, it wasn't some spam or anything, and so it just kind of snowballed from there, man. Like honestly, the biggest thing for me in this whole project, aside from accomplishing something like this, is establishing these lines of communication with these guys and establishing the rapport with them and being able to talk to them like I'm talking with you guys, just off the cuff, no structure, nothing's off bounds. You got a question, you fucking ask them, and they'll do whatever they can to answer it, because they too want to preserve the unit legacy and the history and everything. And so without their help, dude, I wouldn't be anywhere.
So let me ask you this. So when you approach these guys, like how, what was their sentiment? Was it more kind of like, oh, awesome, like a guy wants to know about this, or did it kind of have to build up, the report and all that,
Yeah, you get I got a variety, but was concentrated in the middle. So if you got a guy that's way on this side and a guy on this way on this side that's super eager, and the other guy is like doesn't even want to answer your email, most of the guys kind of fell in the middle or do fall in the middle. They kind of, it's kind of like having your foot on base and kind of seeing, what the direction is as far as what the project was at the time that I was working on. Now that I've published the book, it's a little more, it's a lot more legitimate, because they can actually see, it's something tangible that they can hold and look at and decide for themselves, like, hey, did this guy do a good job, or is he just a Johnny come lately trying to make a buck? And so, at the time, it was some guys were really, really open. Some guys weren't so open. There's still, like I said, you still get a mix of both types, but or all the types, but for the most part, man, guys are super eager about it, especially guys that are writers themselves. John Stryker Meyer, Lynn Black, Lee Birkins, these guys, Joe Parnar, these guys have all written fantastic books, and to see someone as young as I am that is as dedicated to it as I hope people realize that I am, that it is obvious, and they do want to help preserve, because I bring a certain perspective that they might not bring, or that someone else might not bring, because I wasn't there. So in writing about all this stuff, like I have to be real careful about who I talk about and what, like, how I talk about them, because in my book I don't change the names of anybody. If it's a fictional character, the character is 110% fiction. If they are a real person, they are absolutely, I tried to nail down exactly what they were doing, where they were doing it at that time.
Do you find that to be a stressful process? I mean, even here at the Zero Bunker, we obviously recount stories and things like that. And I think, G, you'd probably agree with me that there's a level of stress, because you want to represent it the right way. I mean, these are real heroes and amazing motherfuckers, and like, you're recounting real stories. I feel like that's a level of responsibility. Was that something that was difficult for you?
The level of responsibility is something I didn't quite understand at the time, and for whatever reason, I just was resolved to the fact that I was going to tell the truth, no matter how, like, I wasn't going to gloss over anything. I wasn't going to go out of my way to speak poorly of someone. Occasionally you'll run across a name that perhaps people don't have the highest esteem for. When I come across stuff like that, man, I typically, I don't go out of my way. I kind of decide whether or not it's important and imperative to the story, and if it's not, then you know what, that's not for me to decide, because I wasn't there. So, and I didn't have to deal with those issues at that time. So, if I can't speak well about someone, then I just leave it alone. I don't. It's not something I need to include in the story. And
right.
I'll be honest with you guys, man. Like, there might be like one or two names, and I honestly couldn't pull them off the top of my head right now, of guys that weren't up to snuff in this unit, because this was an all volunteer unit. These guys wanted to be there. The special projects was like a magnet for good guys, and the mission was very, very dangerous, and if not the most dangerous mission in the entire theater of operations. So shitheads typically did not last long in this outfit.
So Jason, so this is where I want to get into. So let's break this down. So what is Mack V Sog?
Yeah,
that's what. All right. So Mack V Sog, the command structure that was running the wartime effort there through the Army was known as the Military Assistance Command Vietnam, MACV, and the special project was known as SOG, S-O-G, Studies and Observations Group. And in the early days, it used to stand for Special Operations Group, but because of how obvious that is, kind of on the nose, the powers that be decided to change that. And it sounds like, on the surface, it sounds like a bunch of bookworms, poring over intelligence reports and photographs and all kinds of shit like that. And they did do that kind of stuff. But Mack V Sog was it had a variety of operational branches to it, and you had, for instance, the maritime branch, which was Ops 31. You had the air branch, which was Ops 32. The one op that I am most well versed in is Ops 35, which was the ground studies group, the ground reconnaissance. And there were a variety of operational branches to this organization. It was before JSOC was a thing, where you had Air Force personnel, you had Marine Corps personnel, you had all the services kind of joint under one umbrella. SOG was probably the first organization that actually was structured this way, which makes it pretty groundbreaking. And they had Air Force, Army, and Marine Corps aviators. They had Special Forces guys who were running the reconnaissance teams and the SLAM companies. There were some SEALs involved in it. So it was you really got a taste of everything with that. No Coast Guard guys though. Sorry.
Damn.
So let me ask you this, man. That's we always got hit on the Coast Guard, man. But let me ask you this, man. So you had these, like, the cream of the crop of these guys, right? And this was during a time where we were just fighting in Vietnam, but everybody knew that the shit was also going on in Cambodia and Laos and North Vietnam and all that. So what was their, I guess, purpose in a way? Because they weren't conventional, obviously, by any means. So what was their purpose of being there to go into these, into denied territory?
So that's a good question. The whole purpose for SOG's existence was to unravel the mysteries of the Ho Chi Minh Trail system. Now, we call it a trail. It was a fucking highway, you guys. Like, it was a legit highway. Like, there were 2-lane highways. This system ran from North Vietnam all the way through into eastern Laos, like northeastern Laos, down like just outside of the Vietnamese border, down into Cambodia, and all along the way there were offshoots, there were branches of this trail system, this roadway, this network, where the North Viets could infiltrate men and materiel into South Vietnam by way of Laos and Cambodia, which were at that time declared neutral. So the North Viets were using these neutral areas, and they were using them in a way that was secret and deniable, But everyone knew that was going on because they had basically done the exact same thing during the earlier years of the Indochina conflict when they were fighting the French. And so this trail system, like they developed this trail system for decades and maintained this trail system. And there were just countless numbers of way stations. There were countless, literally, they had barracks, they had medical facilities, they had weapons and rice caches. They had giant truck parks where they would pull in trucks and work on them and send them back on the trail. I mean, you guys name it, they had it out there. It was, like I said, calling it a trail is kind of a tongue-in-cheek kind of thing because it was much more than a trail. So SOG's whole purpose was to unravel the mysteries of that trail system.
Okay. So even though we were bombing the living shit out of it, because my understanding is that we used to bomb the fucking trail, but within 24 hours, just like little ants, they would just rebuild this whole thing and the highway would just keep going, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So they had a system of some of these workers were pressed into service, as the communists love to do, and a lot of these guys were the motivations varied, but they absolutely had worker battalions who engineer companies and battalions whose sole purpose was to keep the trail open, and they would divide these sections into sections so that these particular units would be responsible for just a section of trail. And they had a brilliant system where if a section of if a section of road was bombed and they needed a bulldozer, they would take the nearest bulldozer and push it down to that unit, that unit of engineers who was working that section, and then the nearest one to the one that was pushed down, and so forth, so that by the time a brand new bulldozer rolled off the factory up in Hanoi, all it had to do was travel a couple miles down the trail, and it was replacing one that had replaced one that had replaced one. So it was absolutely brilliant. One of the reconnaissance team leaders, very famous dude named John Plaster, he had a slick idea about going in to Laos one night and blowing up a bulldozer, thinking that, hey, if we knock out this piece of equipment, then logistically speaking, the trail will stay closed and the NBA won't be able to fill in this bomb crater in time. Well, I forgot who it was that explained that whole system to him about them shuffling material and men down in order to fill a gap and fill a need, and basically deem the mission that it wouldn't work out because of that system. It's brilliant. I mean,
so basically what you're saying is, and I'm going to take the words of a famous door gunner, they were well-disciplined VC, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, they weren't VC, but they were very well disciplined, incredibly.
Which I want to tack on real quick, and I mean, this week we had a pretty heavy loss in the Marine Corps community, and so we want to give a shout out to Gunny Ermy. He was super influential to a lot of Marines. He's done a lot of good into the community and the young Marines, and fortunately he passed away a few days ago. So Semper Fi, and
Semper Fi, and big shout out to the Gunny from Firebase Gloria.
Yep. Yeah, man. There you go. Old school, dude. So, kind of quarterbacking real quick, man. So, all this shit's going on. There's a bunch of little fucking gooks that run around building trails and shit, right?
Hey, are we allowed to say that in 2018? What's the rules here?
Yeah, I don't know, man.
How many liberals? I haven't looked at the statistics. How many liberals do we have on the channel?
I will about to find out. If we get shut down, all it takes is one. That's all it takes.
Okay.
So all they're running around doing all this crazy shit. Now you got these hardcore motherfuckers. They're like, okay, let us loose, right? So what is the team comprised of? Like, how, who do they work with, and like how were they structured for them to go into doing these, missions? Okay,
so particularly with Ops 35, we're talking about the ground studies group, specifically the ground reconnaissance teams. These teams were typically any number of, in the early days, it was about two to three U.S. Special Forces personnel that came from 5th Special Forces Group. And these guys basically went into the local villages around the bases, like these forward operations bases, and they would recruit local indigenous personnel. So, like if you were in Khartoum, there was a large number of Montagnards in the surrounding hills and urban areas, and they would just go in there and they would recruit these guys, and these guys were all too happy to join because they were joining a special forces program, and I like to refer to it as the special projects. We can get into that later, but so these guys would get recruited and they would be paid a fair bit more than the average ARVN soldier, Marvin the ARVN. He didn't get paid shit. Got no respect. Slayed very little pussy. And these guys.
Tang is religion.
Tang is religion. Buy a sticker.
ZeroFoxtrot.com.
Sorry, that's just something we just throw out there as like this is like psyops when we talk about this shit. So
I had to set you boys up for that. I know. So these guys were all too happy to join this special project once they saw the money. I mean, they were basically mercenaries, and so the early days they recruited a lot of Montagnards. At one point, they were getting a lot of Chinese Nungs from like the Cholon district in Saigon. They would also recruit South Vietnamese nationals from prison cells. Some hardened street criminals, pirates and thugs and cutthroats. I mean, they fucking love these guys, man.
It's like some fucking Dirty Dozen shit, right?
Exactly. Yes, precisely. And the special forces guys had the personalities to match them too. So, they were a bunch of hard asses, man. They were hard as woodpecker lips, and they loved to mix it up with the NBA. So honestly, like the not only was the pay better, but the support structure was infinitely better. You had a much better chance of surviving if you were in an outfit like this, because an organization like SOG.
Look, you had me at Slay Pussy. All right, like I don't know what we have there. You had me at Slay Pussy. I feel like that was the end of the.
This is a recruitment effort here, but So the asset level of support was incredibly high, and you didn't have to be a light colonel or a fucking general or some shit to get assets on station. Like when these guys called for assets, man, they fucking showed up, and they dropped bombs all over the place.
Wow.
And so
let me back up for a second. So this is what I want to see if you can, kind of confirm this, right? So we're talking about asset and support. These guys are out there in the boonies, right? They're, facing incredible odds, right? Because they're such a small team.
That's right.
When airstrike, is it true so I'm going to throw this term out there for you guys that don't know Arclight. Arclight was pretty much like bombing missions, like calling B-52s and just level the entire thing. Is it true that it got to the point where these guys that were so valuable that instead of being captured, they would call airstrikes on themselves as a last resort rather than they be fucking captured?
Yeah. That did happen. I don't know what the ratio of deaths were that guys actually called airstrikes in on their own location and were killed by them. I do know that they would use a variety of methods to signal their position before doing so, and obviously the assets would do everything they could to bring it as danger close as possible. But yeah, these guys they had no desire to be captured. Their information was still compartmentalized to specifically their mission, and the indigs, the indigenous troops that were on the team, they didn't know specifically what the mission was. They never knew that because sometimes you couldn't trust the indigs. There were some cases where the indigs turned on the team leader and the assistant.
Wait, hold on a second. You're telling me that if we paid an indigenous force, they could turn on us? I mean, that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Holy
Imagine
shit.
that shit. Yeah, it happened. Actually, I wrote about this in the book, just a fictional part of the story, which if you're interested at all, you're gonna have to pick it up yourself. But no spoilers. But it did happen. There were cases where, like for instance, John Plaster, he had he was in charge of a team. He was a Recon 10, and when Ho Chi Minh. When news of Ho Chi Minh's death filtered down through the ranks and through the military and everything while they were in Vietnam. He noticed that his teammates, his and Diggs, were a little sullen about the whole thing, and he didn't trust him anymore, so he fired him on the spot. Was like, "You guys are done," and fired him. And there were kind of getting ahead of myself here because we haven't even talked about the structure and all that kind of stuff. But SOG absolutely had enemy moles within its ranks, particularly in Saigon. SOG also had a South Vietnamese counterpart called STD, which is the Strategic Technical Directorate.
G has some of those.
Yeah.
I got them from your mom, though, man. So.
Oh, fucking brutal. So, yeah. So if you guys want to talk about it, we can get into the structure so we're not bouncing around too much.
Yeah, no. Well, one thing I actually wanted to, you know what? Go ahead and tap into that because there's one thing, there's a follow-on question that I had for it, which kind of leads into, after you talk about the structure, kind of leads into that. So I'll let you take the floor for that. Go for it.
All right, sure. Yeah, so we talked a little bit about how they recruited guys. Again, the guys weren't really sure what the mission was, the Indigs. All they knew was slay Tang, slay Kong, and get paid doing it. So they were all in.
Yeah.
And the life expectancy was much better. We talked about that versus them being press ganged into the Arvin.
Sure.
So what they would do is they would recruit, say, like 10 or 20 of these dudes, and then they would whittle it back to the absolute best of the best. And that would typically be about, it varied. Some teams were a little larger, some teams were a little smaller, but that was typically about, 12 guys. And so you had 3 Americans. You had the 1-0, which was the numerical designation, and he was the most experienced guy on the team. You had his 1-1, which was the assistant team leader, and you also had the 1-2. Now later on, there were also 1-3s and in some cases 1-4s when you had 4 to 5 Americans on a team, which that was kind of rare. But in the early days, it was typically 2 to 3 U.S. Special Forces guys from 5th Group, and then you had a host of like I said, about 12 indigenous guys, and they would organize the team with a point man, with his slack, which is so basically you have a point man, you have a guy that's walking his slack, and then the column would be staggered back, and the Americans would be staggered sort of in the middle, because when a team broke into contact, the Indigs would often surround the team, the nucleus of the team, because the only way that these guys could get out of a situation was with Americans on their side. Like they needed to protect the Americans because they were the ones that carried the radios.
Oh wow! Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, the Indigs did not carry radios. They knew how to use them. Very basic radio communication skills. The Indigs also weren't really trusted to throw grenades because for some reason that part of the world at that time they didn't have really the arm strength developed like we do to throw baseballs and footballs and fucking hand grenades.
Wow, that's pretty interesting, man. I mean, down to that detail, right, where you wouldn't trust a guy with throwing a hand grenade, and because that's actually pretty interesting.
So the Indigs throw like girls. Is that what you're
saying? But let me ask you this: so talking about hand grenades, right? And I just kind of briefly touch upon this before you move on. Now, the specialized group of Mac V Sog, right, they had all the assets, all the air support, right? But I also heard...
It's the pussy slaying A-team.
Yeah. But I also heard that they were also experimenting with all kinds of variety of weapons. I mean, just for them, they can kind of try it out. Or, they would have like no limits or restrictions on what they could carry, they would modify things based on their missions. I mean, I know, like, for example, they would have like combat boots with the bottom of the fucking boot would be like a shape of a foot. So when they're walking out on the trails, they would not leave boot prints, you know?
Hey, before we go any further, I do want to talk to YouTube for a second. YouTube, if you're watching this, we are not in any way suggesting that we are encouraging someone to modify a weapon in any kind.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
So
the
thank
fucking
you.
new rules. Yeah, do not modify weapons.
We are talking about what happened in Vietnam.
Yeah. We're going to put a massive fucking subtitle for that shit. Yeah, sorry, YouTube fuckers. But
You guys use fucking heads out there. Don't be idiots.
Yeah. So yeah, kind of get us into that a little bit, because I'm pretty curious about what these guys came up with.
So, okay, this is a can of worms. I could go on and on about this stuff. Like, this is going to be like a 3-hour podcast. Anyway, so the office that supported SOG's ground reconnaissance teams and SLAM companies and stuff, they had a special like an S4, and this guy's name was Ben Baker, and he ran this shop called the Counterinsurgency Supply Office, and this guy experimented with all sorts of fabrics for uniforms. They manufactured rucksacks. They manufactured enemy uniforms. They actually manufactured the doctored ammunition, the booby-trapped ammunition that we can get into later. Project Eldest Son / Pole Bean. Pretty fascinating dark ops right there. They also manufactured indigenous rations for the troops who were on recon teams. And so one of the things they did, like G was talking about, was they experimented with this boot that had a reduced footprint underneath, like on the bottom of the sole of the boot. And it was designed to look like a barefoot print. And so they tried this for a little while, and some of the guys that used them swore they'd never do that again, because they were slick as snot, and they would just slip and fall in the mud. So that didn't work out so well. I forget who it was. I'm not sure if the guy's name's been lost to history or not. Probably so, but probably just some lowly private that had a fucking genius idea, and then some ticket puncher took his credit, I'm assuming. But this guy had a great idea of why not just airdrop a bunch of USGI issued boots along the Ho Chi Minh Trail system, and then that'll just solve the whole boot print problem right there.
Wow.
What?
Yeah, they start using them, and wow, that's pretty smart.
Yep.
Yeah.
Fucking brilliant. And actually, a couple of recon teams captured North Vietnamese prisoners off the trail who were wearing USGI boots. So It fucking worked.
Yeah, it's like, how you like communism now, motherfucker? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, but let me ask you this, man. So, because you had an interesting opportunity to actually talk to these guys who have been there. I mean, obviously they don't advertise, they don't walk around wearing, hey, I was in SOG, right? So you were able to find them and talk to them, and I'm sure they shared a lot of interesting stories and informations and about the unit and about their time being there. But I'm super interested in this, and I'm sure CJ is on the same page with this. But these guys, did they ever tell you their mindset of they're on the chopper, they're getting ready to go into fucking Laos, knowing that they might not come back, it might be their last mission? I mean, did anybody ever share what was going through their mind, just kind of getting dumped into the fucking lion's den?
Yeah. Well, yeah, man. It's one of the questions that I haven't really asked that question a whole lot, because I just assumed that I could kind of put myself in that headspace, and probably wrongly assumed that I could do that. But from what I gather, man, these guys were opportunistic, kind of adventurous type dudes, and many of them believed in obviously what they were doing there, and some of them were there just for the fucking adventure. They realized that serving in this unit, you're like I was saying earlier, your life expectancy surprisingly was far better, because they were in control of the mission's planning, of the mission's execution, and all that kind of stuff. These guys were 110% in control of what they were doing. If they didn't like someone on their team, they got rid of them. So the autonomy here cannot be overstated. They're a very autonomous unit. Nobody fucked with these guys, and even just a lowly E4 or E5 buck sergeant, no one fucked with these guys. If you were a recon man, more so if you were a recon 1-0, you kicked ass and you took names, and nobody fucked with these guys. So their level of autonomy was incredibly high. As they're going into Laos, there's no way I can assume what they were thinking. I have to imagine the mission preparations, running on a repeat in their minds. Like, are all the bases covered? Like, these guys didn't smoke dope. They didn't get wasted on the way into the bush. They definitely partied and they definitely raged like crazy. But typically, like, once they moved into isolation to spool up for a mission, it was game face on. This shit's for real. And I want to, like, I'm gonna go on record and say, like, I really feel like what these guys were doing was far different than what even a vanilla Special Forces A-team detachment was doing along the border. These guys were their whole purpose was to collect intelligence, and the intel that they collected was disseminated through the chain of command, was passed on to regular infantry outfits, and passed on to whoever needed it. And what they were doing was ultimately saving American and South Vietnamese lives. I also want to say, like, these guys fought a clean war. The notion of them going into some village somewhere and shooting up some mama and papa son and killing the water buffalo, like, that shit didn't fucking happen in this outfit, man. Like, these guys worked, it was all, anytime they bumped into somebody, it was the fucking enemy, and it was in very close quarters, 20 yards at most, and you typically didn't see the guys arrayed behind these guys, and who knows, it might have just been a trail watcher, it might have been one guy, you never know. So they fought a clean fucking war, man. There was no, I think Peter Arnett back in the late 90s on CNN came out with some hit piece on SOG saying they used some kind of nerve agent or some shit in Laos on some village, and also on American defectors, and that's a crock of fucking bullshit. If anybody still believes that out there, they're
so kind of to that point, did any of these guys share with you? Because we've talked about the political side of Vietnam, and obviously there was I guess the first generation of fake news or whatever you want to call it, But did they share with you any of the struggles or psychological stuff that they dealt with as far as like what civilians kind of perceive the war versus what they actually did?
I think the psychological toll that these guys experienced was based on the loss of their comrades, meaning other recon men and other recon teams, and also the fact that the Americans just simply, that we simply pulled out, and left all these in digs just kind of hanging in the breeze. Which really that's typically what I find disturbs these guys the most is the fact that they were forced to leave their allies behind. Very similar to kind of how we left the Kurds hanging in the breeze, and we just have a record of doing that. It's the policy and all that kind of shit, but like. I really try to steer away from the whole political side of things. Now, of course, when you got big events that happen in the U.S., like in terms of writing about it, I try to pull back from that as much as I can because, like I said,
was that difficult writing about Vietnam? I mean, arguably one of the more political wars. It's got to be hard to not, to keep it completely out of the book.
Yeah, I'll be honest, man. I think in the first book, because I'm working on the sequel now, so the first book is called Gentle Propositions. I really didn't talk a great deal about the politics. I mentioned a couple things about why they were fighting and quietly in a place where they should be fighting loudly in because of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The fact that they were having to fight this secret war where it really shouldn't be a secret because both belligerent parties are here. Why are we not fighting here on a grander scale? Because you have to understand the North Viets forced the Laotians, the hill people, the Hmong and the Cambodians. They forced these people out of these areas. They displaced them when they moved down into these areas to form this trail system. So when I say there were very few, if any, locals there. I feel that to be an accurate statement because they displaced these people and so the only people that were living in these areas were working in support of the North Vietnamese. Some of them were pressed into service, obviously, but that's typically the communist way, fellas.
Well, hey, man, don't worry about the fucking politics. Fuck them. Politics always got to ruin shit for everybody, man. Like, I know the book because I read it, dude, and it's strictly skull fucking, which general propositions, man. He was kind enough, Jason, to send me a signed copy, man. I fucking love it, dude. So I highly suggest you guys go pick it up, man. Amazon, whatever you can get it, like, go fucking get it, man, because this is like some detailed shit. So
also Tang is religion stickers, zerofoxtrot.com.
That's right. Get them too, man. They'll come with the book. How about that?
Oh, right. Man, that's a great combo pack.
Would be sick.
But let me ask you something, man. So this is just one thing that I'm curious about, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because there was also a story that I heard, and maybe you probably know more details about it. But so these small teams went in there, and I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, but their typical mission would be go out there to do recon. They would do like, assault targets or try to blow up the trail, or I even heard it do like prisoner snatches, that kind of deal. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. That was the staple primary mission, was to do one or more of those things on a mission. So you always wanted to capture a prisoner. There's no better intelligence than a guy who you just pulled out of the bush, who's been working the trail. One of the most successful missions that was ever conducted in Laos by a SOG recon team was John Plaster's team captured an enemy truck driver. And these guys were assigned specific corridors on the trail, like I was saying, and they would memorize these sections of the road so that they could drive them without even lights, because lights attract bombers, and you can't move men and materiel if your shit's getting scattered to the wind. So. Reconnaissance missions were all about intelligence. Guys got on the ground and had to, shoot their way through an area, and hopefully they could break contact and continue the mission. If they could get in quietly. Now, as the war progressed, it got more and more and more difficult to get in and get on the ground quietly, just because the enemy. At the height of the war, man, the enemy had about 60 to 70,000 security troops just to prevent SOG recon teams from doing their job.
Wait, can you say that number again?
60 to 70,000.
So you're talking. So the odds. These guys. The team was like how many people? 6 to 10, 8-man teams.
Yeah. And typically about 8 men. An 8-man team. Meant that you could ride 2 Hueys or a single King Bee in. Now that also means that you've got a variety of other birds that are supporting the insertion package. But the smaller the footprint, the easier. Now some guys like Larry White was a renowned recon man, and his call sign was 6-pack because he used to run teams that were a number of 6 guys. So he liked the 6-man team.
So the odds that these guys faced, how big are we talking about here? Like the odds of because obviously they went in there, and I'm assuming, did they make contact all the time when they went in?
It was frequent. Enemy contact was pretty frequent. Like I said, some recon guys, like team leaders, were really ballsy. Some guys were, the personalities vary, and the teams always were modeled after the Recon 1-0's personality. So if you had a real ballsy guy, the team would be very ballsy. Guys used to like to try and break contact and continue the mission. Charlie Mike. Some guys got spooked on the LZ and called in a prairie fire. Like the area of operations in Laos was codenamed Prairie Fire, and so when they would get on the ground and something would happen, they would call, if they had to call a prairie fire emergency, that meant that all the other teams that were deployed would go high and dry, meaning they would try and get to a safe spot and hole up for a little while. And all available assets would be directed to that team's area of operations. And the Cubby Rider, who was a recon guy, a former recon guy, would be flying in the back seat of the forward air controller. And these guys would be quarterbacking the insertion, the extraction, the close air support, the bright light mission if it came to it. These guys were the lifelines, the Cubby pilots and the Cubby Riders.
So let me ask you something about the extractions, right? So they make contact. Is it more like, did they just, he says some of them they broke and then kept going with the mission. Some of them called the helo. But let's say, let's just assume that these guys went in there and they're, coming up against, like, I don't know, 10,000 fucking NVA, right? Now they got to break contact. They got to get to the LZ, right? So kind of paint us a picture here. What is it like to be in a hot LZ, and literally just fucking fighting for your life?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to be able to paint you the clearest picture because I never did it before. But
sure.
It's like I said, you're not necessarily seeing everyone around you. What you're trying to do is you're trying to get to an opening in the canopy, if at all possible, that's just big enough to get a Huey in there. He can land and get your team out one load at a time, right? So you got an air package with, let's say, like 4 or 5 Hueys. You got a swarm of Cobra gunships, and these guys are going to be swirling around the exterior of trying to draw a perimeter around the team and keep the enemy off you. And then you've got the Covey Rider. He's stacking winged air assets, and they're putting in airstrikes on enemy gun emplacements. You've got 12.1 or 12.7 51 caliber. Sorry, you've got 51 caliber gun emplacements all over the fucking place, and these gun emplacements are easy for the enemy to move because it's a small but crew-served weapon. So they can move these positions all over. The enemy has these positions ringed with bigger caliber anti-aircraft guns. So you've got airstrikes going in all over the fucking place. Maybe you're shooting, maybe you're not. But if you're at a position that you can Alamo up, you basically deploy your team in a very tight perimeter. You don't want it too tight because if the enemy is able to concentrate all the gunfire into one specific area, you're going to get your shit pushed in. So
wow, man, that's some intense. I mean, that's got to be some expensive fucking fireworks, man. That just it's so interesting that you have this orchestra of fucking firepower, that's all being coordinated just to make sure that these fucking 6, 7, 8 guys are getting pulled out. I mean, that's a shit ton of firepower for just a small group of guys, man. You know what I mean?
It is, and these sometimes these extractions go on and on and on for hours and hours and hours. Sometimes the team is constantly running, like they're on the run, because the enemy. I mean, this is the enemy's backyard. Like they know where all the clearings are. They have all the clearings mapped with they have little positions built above the clearing so they can shoot down into the clearing. The enemy is always evolving, man, and so. They had to be able to stay one step ahead of the enemy, and sometimes they weren't able to, and
sure.
Sometimes you're the bug, sometimes you're the windshield, man. It's just how it goes. And so, a lot of times the enemy would let a team get on the ground halfway, and so they would let half the team get in, and then as the second bird would come in, they would shoot that bird down, and then all of a sudden you've got this shit show of people scattered all over the place. And I mean, it was a nightmare when it started, when things went like that.
What's interesting is that I heard a story, and maybe you heard it too, and I don't know. The guy that told it was, he was in SOG. So to keep it long story short, they were in Cambodia or Laos, I can't remember. They got it, made contact. They, pulled back, got to the LZ. I mean, you had thousands of fucking MVA that were trying to snatch them. So what was happening was during this fucking orchestra of firepower, he's directing his team, trying to direct the fucking helicopters to land, right? And in the meantime, he's trying to direct the fucking fighter pilots to drop fucking bombs, right? So he's talking to one pilot, and he's like, hey, I need you to essentially bomb that fucking tree line. So he sees the plane come up, swoops right by, but doesn't drop anything, right? And he keeps fucking telling the guys, like, hey, you need to drop these fucking bombs on this tree line, and plane comes back, doesn't do a fucking thing. Now, he's like, I can only assume he's maybe the team leader, but he's making sure everybody gets on board, and he's like the last guy to get on the fucking helicopter, right? So he gets back to base, tracks down the pilot, and tells him, is like, hey, man, like, what part of fucking bomb the goddamn tree line don't you get? And this is what he said. He's like, I could not bomb it because, the guys were like too fucking close. And he's like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, there were a bunch of other people behind you and shit. And it's like, and then he realized that it was actually the NVA that it got so close to him that it almost grabbed him off the fucking helicopter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've heard stories like that. Yeah, and man, stories like that in this unit are a dime a dozen, man. And yeah, it's there were a lot of times where they were shooting guys like as they were climbing on the birds to extract, and they were shooting dudes like right at the edge of the skids.
Man.
Yeah, because the enemy really wanted to get these guys alive, right? Like if the enemy could get a SOG recon team or one guy, they would absolutely sacrifice as many people as possible in order to get one of these guys alive.
Did that ever happen though? Did anybody ever get captured?
To my knowledge, no. But again, that doesn't really mean that it didn't happen. Like there are plenty of SOG recon warriors that are still missing in action to this day.
Wow.
David Babyson Davidson was one. There are, and the reason why I bring his name up is because his parents actually were at the time scouring through released photographs of American POWs being held by the North Vietnamese, and there were a couple of pictures of Americans that they thought could have been him. Mm-hmm. But to my knowledge, man, no, I don't believe any SOG recon men were ever captured alive. But again, that's. I
have a question for him, G. Being like writing this book and doing, and it's a combination of both, factual stuff and some fictional things. What is his thought around what I can only explain to be one of the most amazing documentaries ever, Tropic Thunder? Now the accuracy of.
All I tell you is CJ is to load and lock.
Load and lock.
Yeah. Man, I need to watch that. It's been
I know, right?
Dude, did you actually know? I had no idea that was fucking what's the dude's name? The guy that played the black guy?
It's Robert Downey.
I had no fucking. I was like, man, he looks familiar though.
Dude,
but I had no idea.
I still think that was one of his most epic roles. That was just hilarious.
Yeah,
that was a great movie. Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
Dude, that's yeah, man. I was gonna ask you something in regards to the POWs and all of that. I mean, what kind of recognition did these guys get? I mean, they're running secret operations. I mean, was it kind of like, hey, here's your Bronze Star in a bunker, but we're going to take it back because you were not supposed to be there kind of deal? Or how did that work?
So the approval for decorations for this unit, first of all, let me just say, this is the most highly decorated unit that served in Vietnam.
Wow.
There were, I forget the count. There were at least 6 or 7 medals of honor awarded to this unit. And I think at least half of those came from, I don't have my facts in front of me,
6 or 7. Wow.
Yeah.
And some of them were actually awarded. They were trying to award them more than once.
Correct. Whoa. Yeah. Bob Howard was a recon man at Command and Control Central, and he's one of the I say characters, but he's one of the figureheads in my story, in my book, and he was submitted for the medal on 3 separate occasions. And the only reason why they downgraded it twice is because he wanted to keep running. Like, he wanted to keep running missions.
Wow.
Once you receive, I think after John Basilone in WW2 in the Pacific, I think if I'm not mistaken, he was awarded the medal and then went back
and he got killed.
In action, correct? So I think I want to say after that instance, they stopped letting guys go back into combat who were.
I mean, can you imagine that, dude? I mean, the guy is like,
how big are your balls to be able to get 3 recommendations? Like,
no, it's the biggest part of it is that the guy's like, you get the Medal of Honor, is like, nah, keep it. I'm all right.
Yeah,
I'm good.
Am I the only one sitting here thinking, like, I want to go to the Marine Corps? Like, what kind of pussy do you get when you go to the Marine Corps ball with, like, a couple of Medal of Honors?
The fucking Marine Corps ball comes to you, sir.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. He was submitted for the medal 3 separate occasions, and finally was awarded that medal for his actions in late 1968, I believe in Cambodia. I could be mistaken again. There's so much information that I just can't keep it all. I can't retain it all. It's ridiculous the amount of research that
would be the most thug life thing. Marine Corps ball, 2 medals of honors, and you're still a Lance Corporal.
Yeah,
like I'm just like a true thug.
Yeah.
No, but that's actually it's quite amazing that, like, such a small group of individuals have done. It just goes to show you the adversities of and the dangers and what these guys have been through. But let me ask you this: what was I guess like the turnaround ratio? I mean, you know, how many guys got replaced? How many got killed? What was like the casualty ratio for the teams?
At the height of what SOG was doing, at the very height, their casualty rate was something like 110 or 20%. It was something ridiculous like that, meaning that guys were being wounded more than once. Like everybody in the ground reconnaissance unit was being wounded at least once, if not more. And you know, a variety of wounds. I mean, you name it. Doug Miller, who was a recon guy at CCC, who was not posthumously, but he was awarded the Medal of Honor for a mission in Cambodia. On that mission, he was shot 3 times, I think, twice in the abdomen. And like 3 weeks later, this crazy fuck was back at Khartoum, like hanging with the boys in the club, just like on the mend. I mean, these guys, you couldn't keep them down. They were indomitable spirits, man. You could not keep them down. They were.
If only society was just a fraction of
shit. Yeah, no shit, man.
You know what these guys had, man. I mean, they get shot 3 times, dude, and then just come back like it's no big deal. I mean, that's
yeah, dude.
Wow,
it's nuts. And then you know, it's just the odds, and the thing is, like, it gets in your blood. Like the saying that you hear a lot today about the GWAT and everything is like, you know, or what I call the never-ending war on terror, the fucking NEWAT. But you hear about guys like being downrange and like being as cool as fucking possible, and they're never going to be that cool again. So, you know, that kind of shit, it has to get in your blood, and these guys were no different, man. These guys were just young kids, man. They were just they were doing a job that few people had the temperament to do. But once you were there and you were with the same type of individuals as you are, it didn't want to be anywhere else.
Sure.
I've got a crazy story. I don't know what the guy's name is or what all the specific details were, but he was a recon man at Command and Control North, and I forget how long he'd been there for. I want to say like 18 months. And so he de-roasted. He returned stateside, processed out of the Army, and a couple months later, he just shows back up at Command and Control North, moves right back into the 1-0 position on his old team, and it's like nothing ever changed. Well, a couple of missions later, he was killed, and it turns out that this crazy motherfucker just decided to put his Class A's back on, showed back up when he was stateside, showed back up to the West Coast facility where they sent guys to and from. I think it was one in Washington and one in San Francisco. I forget, but he just showed back up with his uniform on and said, "Yeah, I don't have any orders, but you know, I lost my orders," and they cut him new orders, and he came back as a fucking civilian, and was a civilian. Showed back up at Recon Company in Command and Control North. And because he was a familiar face, everyone kind of figured, because that was a common thing. Guys would go back home and then, you know, realize like, hey, this kind of fucking sucks. Like, you know, I was just in charge, like John Rambo says, you know, I was in charge of $1 million equipment and calling in air support, and I could fly a helicopter. Well, you know, all that shit, you know, applied to these guys. Like, these guys were responsible for men and materiel and for a job that only a few people really had the temperament and the skill.
Well, gee, you spoke to this a little bit, where you had said that one of the misconceptions is like there was so many people that were forced to be there, or you know, and it was a lot of volunteers, a lot of people that wanted to be there, wanted to be fighting in the war, and that was a civilian misconception.
Yeah. So what CJ's bringing up is one of the episodes that we talked about Vietnam, and was, you know, breaking the myth that, you know, everybody thinks that Vietnam were all draftees, and this is just one clear indication that motherfuckers went on there, you know, for their own reasons, but a lot of them did volunteer. I mean, this guy wanted to just go back and fucking slay gooks and shit. Cool, awesome. You know, so the whole thing about, you know, everybody being drafted and all that shit, it's bullshit. I mean, I think 75% were actually volunteers.
That's correct, yeah. And the recent, now we were talking earlier about the Medals of Honor being awarded to SOG Ground Reconnaissance. Gary M. Rose, he was a medic assigned to Command and Control Central, and he was present during Operation Tailwind. And during that operation, his actions were eventually deemed worthy of a Medal of Honor. And so he has become SOG's 12th Medal of Honor.
Jesus.
12 Medals of Honor.
12. Wow.
Yeah.
And if I remember right, he was actually awarded a Medal of Honor like recently, maybe a couple years ago, right?
Yeah, no, this was actually, let's see, I made this post on Instagram back in October 2017. So this was recent. This just happened.
Wow. Well, this one thing, man, because I follow you on Instagram, dude. I love your feed because there's so much. You have some, I don't know where you get all those photos, man, because they're awesome, dude. And you got, awesome descriptions and a lot of knowledge, man, especially, about SOG. But there was one photo that stuck with me, and this is what I kind of want to get into. There's a photo of, and I don't know the guy's name, man, but he was holding, I think he was holding like a Car 15, man. He was an African-American dude. And he just had this stare. He was just like done.
Ben Thompson.
Yeah, he was done. I mean, I saw that photo, man, and I was just like, okay, this man, everybody has a breaking point. I feel like, okay, he reached his, which kind of brings me into what you were saying. Like, these guys got back and they're like, man, fuck society. I'm going to go back and do my shit. Well, the wars are going to end eventually. You cannot fucking slay communists as much as you want to. It's going to end someday. So what now? What do these guys do? I mean, what?
Well, if you are slaying communists, you can't talk about it on YouTube right now.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
So these guys, and this is something that I intend to tackle in the towards the end of the sequel book that I'm currently writing. But a lot of these guys found their way into to the Bush Wars in Rhodesia. Some of these guys found their way, like Larry White became one of the main guys that was at the Joint Casualty Recovery Center. I forget the exact acronym, but these guys stayed on in Laos and Cambodia, stayed on in Southeast Asia rather, and were tasked with finding and recovering the remains of downed air crewmen, Americans who were killed in action across the fence in Laos and Cambodia. That's what that unit does. Is that they still have that mission.
I think what I think what Gio is saying. What's interesting though is like at the end of the day, like all of that's it's kind of a Band-Aid on a bullet wound in a sense, right? Where you're medicating that kind of thing, and eventually the civilian world is coming one way or the other.
Right.
And so I think it's how did these guys respond going back eventually whenever they had to go back into, you got to go back to suburbia and coach Little League soccer? How the fuck do you do that?
Dude, you guys would be better to answer that question than me, man. Honestly, I don't know how you go from 110% to whatever civilian life percent is. I don't know what that is. I think a lot of these guys struggled with demons. Joe Parnar, he was a medic in SOG, and he actually wore a lot of different hats at Command and Control Central. He was a recon man. He was a medic on the base. He was a medic on the teams. He was a chase medic. So he did a lot of different things. And, one of the things that he told me was like, my experiences in Vietnam basically ruined medicine for me, because he basically said, like, some people who wouldn't be that shot up, just barely a scratch would fucking die on you. And some other guy over here who'd have his, half his face hanging off, he would somehow live. And so it didn't make any sense. And so when he got back, medicine for him, it was done. Like he couldn't be involved in medicine anymore because he lost guys who he shouldn't have, So
wow.
I don't know how you go. That transition's going to always be a dicey proposition for, pardon the pun, but it's going to be tough it's got to be tough, because like I was saying earlier, like these guys were in charge of so much, and then all of a sudden, like all they have to do is just hold down a job and have a roof over their heads, and for some reason, like that seems to be a code that they can't seem to crack for whatever reason. And then other guys,
it's funny that I mean, it's sometimes even for myself, I look at I look back on a lot of things and I say, man, I was doing this, and that. And now it's like this very simple task is like the hardest one, right? And it just, I guess I wouldn't say like, I think it's just, you know, being in the military and being in those situations and kind of like living it, you know, in that high level, you know, high stress level situations, man. And
there was one of the perfect, it was a recent movie they did. It was a perfect illustration of just that was it was that fucking movie with the EOD, you know, is of course a GWAT movie with, what the fuck is it called?
The Hurt Locker?
Yeah, the Hurt Locker.
Are you serious?
Well, so check it out. when he's, you know, he keeps going back, right? And then it shows him in the grocery store and he's standing on, and she's like, hey, just grab some cereal. And he's just looking down this aisle with like a billion cereals. And he's like he feels lost almost. He's like the most simple thing, just pick out some fucking cereal.
Right.
And it was just kind of had that. I think it was a great illustration of what you're saying, though.
Yeah, I mean that movie definitely had, you know, it had its moments. I mean,
I'm not defending the whole movie for sure.
Yeah,
but I think that there was, when you read between the lines and like some of the psychology behind this idea of like being addicted to war, addicted to that adrenaline, and not being able to function with just being a dad.
Well,
you know?
it's like having, you know, you got two fucking broads and shit, and you just staring at them. You're like, well, what now?
Right.
So, yeah, man, I think honestly, as someone that doesn't have to deal with this kind of thing, like, you know, my opinion doesn't mean shit, but I think, in my experience, I can't, you know, obviously I can't relate in this regard, but I think honestly, it's purpose, man. It's having a purpose and being able to apply yourself to that purpose and being wholly dedicated to it. Like, you guys are absolutely a shining example of having a new purpose and being dedicated to it, man. And I mean, I think it's a great thing to see. And, you know, all these veteran-owned companies and everything, like, I think it's a fantastic thing, man. I'm not trying to go, you know, overboard with the, you know, the veteran worship and the hero worship and all that kind of shit. I think there's too much of that going on, but
sure,
you know, again, that's not for me to decide. So, you know, I think those things kind of work themselves out eventually. But, you know, a lot of these guys came back with you know, with issues, and it took them a while to find a new purpose. And guys like Lee Birkins, you know, he came back and kind of dedicated himself to finding, it kind of sounds kind of hokey, but kind of dedicated himself to meditation and martial arts as a form of that meditation, and also worked incredibly closely with the VA system, trying to make it easier for guys to get the help that they needed. I know he, you know, he went through a string of experiences stateside, and also I think he lived homelessly as a homeless man in California, or in Hawaii, excuse me.
Wow.
Yeah, he now lives in Colorado. I was actually supposed to go and visit him last year, but my plans kind of fell through, and hopefully I'll be able to make it out there and see him. But, you know, like I said, I mean, I don't think it's any different between now and then, regardless of how veterans are being treated now as opposed to then. I think the GWAT has absolutely gotten a better deal in that regard. I mean,
right.
Absolutely on that. That's absolutely.
Well, man, I would tell you, first of all, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And I could just kind of really quickly, just something, recircle back around to something I said earlier was, you know, there is a group of military veterans that have kind of the stick up their ass about like, oh, this guy's a civilian, what the fuck does he know, whatever. You know what? Fuck you guys, all right? Like, and these are my people. But the truth is that, you know, you are incredibly pivotal, in my opinion, of, you know, you could recite stuff, like listening to you it's unbelievable. I mean, here I am, a Marine Corps veteran, you know, I served overseas. I don't know half the shit that you do, and you're able to speak this and touch people and share these stories, and, you know, that's so much more than I can do. And so to me, nothing but props, you know, civilian or not, dude, you're an incredible guy, and this book is awesome. I haven't read it yet, and I'm excited to, but yeah, I mean, yeah.
So the one thing I wanted to add on top of that, he's right on the spot, man. And I mean, just looking at, you know, Sergeant Lee Birkins read your book, you know, because it's got it on the cover, man. I mean, I can only imagine that you put all this work into it, and then have the same guys who have lived through it and saying, "Hey, man, Jason, you did fucking good, bro." You know?
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, like I said, that really to me has been the highlight of this whole experience and the project itself. It's just like I said, I just wanted to tell a story for some reason. I felt compelled to tell a story, and if I'm able to help preserve a unit's history and the men that served in this unit, then that's really my purpose. And so I'm doing it for SOG right now, and maybe at some point I'll do it for some other unit. I'm not sure what unit it'll be. I mean, there's a variety of subjects, military subjects that fascinate me. World War I being one of the tip-top ones. So who knows?
Dude, I think I put your book right under Tropic Thunder. That's right there.
Awesome,
hey,
man.
fuck him. Don't listen to him, dude. Hey, for all you guys out there, man, General Propositions, you go check it out, man.
Yeah,
Make sure you get a copy.
Where can they get hooked up? I'm sure we'll have links and shit down below.
Yeah, we'll have links, but let them know.
Yeah, so you can find it on Amazon is the easiest way.
What the fuck is Amazon?
I do. What's that?
What is Amazon? What is the
Amazon.
fuck?
It's what's running everything right now. Shit.
You can buy everything except pussy on Amazon.com. I'm sure that's coming.
That will come soon, my man. It will come soon.
Yeah, so you can get it on Amazon. You can get it in Kindle format or paperback. And I also sell these. I typically get a couple of boxes every few months or so, and I'll sell some on Instagram. If you guys want to hit me on Instagram, it's at JSECONOMOS. Mm-hmm. And that's typically where you can keep up with me and all the stupid shit I'm doing, whether it's climbing mountains or shooting guns or writing books. So,
well, we'll make it real dumbass proof for everybody listening. We got links down below. You literally just click on the fucking blue link, and it takes you wherever you want to go.
Right.
I think that's it, man.
Yeah, man. Jason, thanks for sharing all the knowledge, bro, and your passion. You got our support, man. You keep doing what you're doing, brother. And we'll definitely have another episode, man, because I know it's there's a lot more that we just covered in here. This is just like tip of the iceberg, man. And for all you guys that want to hear more about Mack V Sog, go check out his Instagram, get his book, and listen to this podcast. We're going to have more episodes, man. So
awesome, man. I can't thank you guys enough. This was a lot of fun. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yes,
Thank you, sir. All right, you guys subscribe. See you.